When I was a little kid, probably around 5 or 6 years old, we used to drive to see my grandmother. She lived about an hour away in Forest Hills, which is on the outskirts of Boston. We didn't go all the time, but once in a while my mom would visit her and I'd go along for the ride with her. Once we got there, she'd stay for about 3 or 4 hours, and after about 15 minutes, me being a kid, I'd get bored and want to go outside and play or go around the house exploring while the grown-ups talk about grown-up stuff. My grandmother's house was an older brick building. It was big, so there was a lot of cool stuff to look at up in the attic or down in the basement where my grandpa used to work. And even though it was really creepy in either place, it was still really interesting. There was an open lot next to her house where another house, I guess, had caught on fire years ago, and it was torn down and never rebuilt. I'd often see kids my age out there playing when I came over, which again wasn't too often. One time while I was up in the attic looking around, I looked out the window and saw some kids down in the lot playing. So I asked my mom if I could go out and play with them, and she said yes, just don't go too far. Plus she could see me from the window. I went down, and as kids do, I just walked over and said, "Hi, my name is Billy," and then before you know it, we were all fast friends. One of the kids I remember from the last time was there. His name was Timmy, and he also remembered me. As we were all playing, I could hear them saying, Rod Dilly, come over here. I'm Rod Dilly, so don't be scared." I didn't think anything about it at first, but then they kept saying it over and over, so I had to ask them, "Hey, what is that you keep saying? What's Rod Dilly?" And as they played on the rocks and jump rope, Timmy said, "He's a clown." I asked, "Is the circus in town or something?" And he said, "No, he used to live over there." I said, "Where?" And he pointed over to my grandmother's house. Now, it was a thickly settled neighborhood with a lot of other houses around, so I thought he was just pointing in a general direction. So I made him confirm and said, "Where?" And he pointed again to my grandmother's house and said, "In that big brick house." At this point, I could clearly see that he was talking about my grandmother's house. When I asked him what the little rhyme was that they kept saying over and over, he told me it's what the clown used to say to little children. Now I was totally confused. At that point, a few of the kids said that they had to go home now for dinner, and the others said, "Okay, we'll walk with you. We have to go that way too," and said goodbye. Before I knew it, they were gone, and I was standing there by myself. At this point, I was trying to figure out who the clown was that lived in my grandmother's house. I know my grandmother's lived there for at least 55 years now, so maybe it was someone who lived there before her, maybe. I don't know. I went in and walked to the kitchen where my mom and grandmother were sitting and asked, "Who's Rod Dilly?" They both stopped short and looked at me with almost horrified looks on their faces, and then my mom said, "I don't know, where did you hear that?" I told them that the kids outside I was playing with were singing, Rod Dilly, come over here. I'm Rod Dilly, so don't be scared." My mom turned white, and my grandmother was just sitting there. Now, I know I was only a young kid, but I wasn't stupid, and they clearly knew something and didn't want me to know. After a while, I kind of forgot about it, and then later on that day after we left, we were driving home, and I was looking out the window and not really thinking about what I was saying. I started singing, Rod Dilly, come over here. I'm Rod Dilly, so don't be scared." Then in a really loud voice, my mom said, "Don't say that or sing it ever again. It means a bad thing." I think after she said that, she realized what she had just done and gave it away that she knew what it meant. After a few more minutes passed while we drove, she said to me, "You're probably too young to hear this, but I'm going to tell you so you know, and then I don't want you to ever speak about it ever again to anyone." Now, I was kind of scared, but I looked at her and just listened. She told me that years ago, before I was born, she had an older brother, but he's gone now, and he used to dress up as a clown and perform at different places like at the circus and different shows, but then at some point he became a bad man and used to lure children in by singing that rhyme to them. This all happened back in the 40s and was the biggest news around. He was eventually caught by police, and before standing trial he disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. To this day, we don't know what happened to him. To the kids in the neighborhood, it's just an old legend, but their parents know what really happened. And he was your Uncle Dylan. Back when we were kids, all in our late teens and early 20s, the Brockton Fair used to come to town in July for a week, and we'd all pile into the car and go. It was one of the best things we used to like to do as kids. Now, I say kids, but in a sense, we were young adults at this point. We had our licenses and cars, and were starting to get jobs and apartments and everything. We'd been going to the Brockton Fair since before we could even drive, but now that we had our licenses, we could go without asking our parents. Well, a few years back, me and my buddies Steve, Jeff, and Bob had decided to go. We always went in my car because I had a big long 4-door Oldsmobile and it was pretty comfortable, so we all piled in and took off for the Brockton Fair. At this time we all came from and lived in Norton, Massachusetts, so it was about a 30-minute ride to Brockton, but well worth it, plus we had some friends from Brockton who we'd meet there sometimes. Well, this one year we got there and parked and went into the fair. It was a great time of life being young and free. We'd hit all the rides and get some junk food and scope out some pretty girls. It was a blast. At one point while we were there was some kind of a clown act that everyone was watching, and it looked pretty cool, so we stopped to watch, especially since everyone else was gathered around. There were like 2 or 3 different clowns, and they were doing jumps and flips and things. At the end of the show, they all stood and bowed while everyone clapped at their performance. At one point, I noticed that one of the clowns kept looking over at me, though, with a really weird, creepy look on his face. Now, I wasn't paranoid or anything, but it was pretty obvious that he was staring at me. I kind of nonchalantly said to my buddies, "Hey, you guys, don't look fast, but that clown on the end there keeps looking over at me and has a really messed up, creepy look on his face. What's up with that?" So they pretended to look around and then slowly looked over at him and then came back and said, "Yeah, dude, that is creepy." It was the end of the night and we were getting ready to go anyway, so I said, "Are you guys ready to get out of here?" And they said, "Yeah," so we started walking away. I purposely didn't look back at the clown and waited until I was like over 100 feet away, and then as we were walking out of the gate to leave the fairgrounds, I slowly looked back and saw that the clown was still staring at me and stepping in our direction. I told my buddies there was something clearly wrong with that guy. We walked to my car in a somewhat faster pace than normal, got in and took right off to go home. As we drove, we were all talking about what just happened, and my buddy Bob was laughing and fooling around, saying that if he needed to, he would have kicked the clown's butt, and then we'd all start laughing and goofing like boys do. As we drove down Route 123, it was a 4-lane road, 2 lanes going one way and 2 going the other way, in the opposite direction. I stopped for a red light, and as we were waiting for it to turn green, another car pulled up next to my car on the left side. I looked over and it was that clown again, and now he had an angry look on his face and looked like he was pissed. I said to my friends, "Holy crap, look at this," and they all looked over and saw him. Right at that second the light turned green, so I took off, determined to get away from this guy. My friends were all looking around and saying, "Is this guy serious?" I could see the headlights of his car in my rearview mirror because now it was starting to get dark out. I tried to lose him, and just as he was out of sight, I would see his headlights come back around the bend again, and then they'd start getting closer and closer. I was going pretty fast, but I didn't want to get us killed or kill anyone else for that matter. This was back in the day, so we didn't all have cell phones that we could have just used to call and get help on, and stopping and calling the police on a payphone was out of the question. We didn't know what this guy was capable of. I personally didn't want to get assaulted or even worse, so as I was driving, we were trying to put together a plan. I was getting close to home now, but didn't want to lead this guy right to my house because then he'd know where I live. I took a fast right turn onto Newland Street, and as I was speeding down the road, my buddy Steve said, "Bang a right onto Red Mill Road." Now, Red Mill Road was a long dirt road that we always used to go down to the end on the weekends and party and drink beer with all our friends. It was about 3 miles long and turned into a dead end, and then was just all woods. We'd have big bonfires and listen to music, but eventually there were a lot of other people that started to do the same thing, and then eventually it all got out of control, so that cops started patrolling the area all the time, and even hourly sometimes until kids stopped going down there. Well, anyways, after I took the right, I was hoping to lose the guy here, but thought to myself, I really hope he was far enough back and didn't see me take the turn, because if not, once we got to the end of this road, there wasn't anywhere else to go and we'd be cornered. I even turned my lights off before taking the right and was pretty sure he was far enough back to miss seeing us turn. So after I turned, I slowed down and kept my lights off for a few seconds, but then had to turn them back on to see because it was pitch black out. We kept looking out the back window and didn't see any lights, and it totally looked like we lost them. We all breathed a sigh of relief and figured we'd just stay down here for an hour until some time passed and then leave and go home. Then all of a sudden a car turned down the road, and it was definitely the clown because I could see the same headlight system on his car. Okay, now we were definitely in trouble. We got to the end and turned around, but there was nowhere to go. We watched him get closer and closer, and he pulled up to us and stopped right up to my front bumper and had us cornered in. He got out of the car and had something in his right hand, but it was more behind his back, so I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but we knew it wasn't anything good. He now had this really satisfying grin on his face and said in a real creepy voice, "Come on out, it's time to play," and then made this really sinister laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We quickly locked all the doors, and then just as he got to my driver's side window, from out of nowhere a cop pulled up and I started blaring the horn. The cop put the spotlight on him and obviously saw the clown's weapon because all we heard was, "Freeze, drop your weapon." The officer arrested him and put him in handcuffs and then in the back of the police car. We gave him the full details on everything that happened that night. It ends up that this guy was wanted in 8 states for murder, robbery, and assault, and they've been looking for him for 3 years. The really weird part about all this is that the cop told me later on that the clown said I looked like someone that he knew from his past and who he wanted to get revenge on. He was clearly crazy.